Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Star Wars, Star Trek, the Discworld, Warhammer 40k, Dune, you pick the setting, but ask yourselves this. What do the Bajorans before the occupation, the Galactic Empire, the 40k Imperium, Borogravia and the Bene Tleilaxu all have in common? Well, if it isn't obvious, they are all theocracies. Now, do you need to know what a theocracy is when world building? Honestly, I believe it helps tremendously if you do, especially if you are creating a world in a deity heavy reliant setting. That was a mouthful. So I invite you to stick around, have a cup of something tasty, and I will give you a short version of what you need to know to take your world building to the next level. Hello all you wonderfully funky people, Funky Monkey here. Welcome to today's episode of Funky Monkey MP. Let's start digging through history, shall we? To better help us understand what a theocracy is, I propose we first start with why you should have one, or at least one, in your world. But before that, if you want to learn more about a specific moment in history, some event, a culture or two, anything that you think will help you in your world building, make sure you leave a comment down below and perhaps I'll make a video regarding it. Now, let's get back to theocracies. Theocracies offer a lot of opportunities regardless of the setting you are running, be it a darker one or a happy-go-lucky one. It allows you as a world builder to create a very strong representation of how religion can be used either for good or for bad, and how depending on the teachings of the religion followed, things can take a weird or even dark turn really fast. Plus, a religious state most times comes with a form of religious police. Actually, I think every single time they have a religious police, be it the morals police or the Inquisition. This allows you to explore a more nuanced aspect of life in your world. You can introduce a sort of resistance to the fundamentalists of the state in question. And you can even play around with the idea of too much good is actually bad by imagining a state that is devoted to absolute good and absolute justice, policed by an order of paladins, let's say. What happens when the slightest of infractions take place? What happens when a kid steals an apple? If you've seen Star Trek The Next Generation, you might remember that episode when Wesley Crusher was sentenced to death for stumbling upon and destroying by mistake an enclosure and a few flowers. The slightest of transgressions met with the utmost ruthless of punishments. This can easily be represented and be at the core of a whole story in your world, with your imagination being the only limit. With that established, what is a theocracy? According to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, a theocracy is a form of government in which the state is ruled by immediate divine guidance or by officials who are regarded as divinely guided. In other words, the god either selects and speaks directly to the ruler, or the ruler is selected by the god and is an interpreter of the divine will. Or in other circumstances, the heads of the state religion are very close to the actual ruler and dictate the direction of the country by interpreting the divine will. In other words, the ultimate supreme leader of the theocracy is the supreme god or gods depending on the setting. I hope you can already spot the issues with this. What is the origin of theocracies? The term originates in ancient Greece, theokratia, and is broken down in two words. Theos, meaning God, or in the case of ancient Greeks, gods, and krateo, meaning to rule. So it literally means ruled by gods, or in a more nuanced way, the human incarnations. The term was coined in the 1st century CE by the Roman Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, or Yosef ben Matityahu, sorry for butchering that name, who explained that there are three main forms of government: monarchy, oligarchy, and democracy, with a fourth one existing in the form of theocracy, and it was unique to the Jewish population of ancient times. He mentions in his writings that for the Jewish population, especially in the province of Judea, their God was sovereign and that the God's word was law. How did and still do Theocrats come to power? Historically speaking, upon the death of a religious leader, a new one was elected by religious bodies or religious scholars. They are selected based on different characteristics such as standing within the religion, adherence to the religion, dogma and beliefs regarding the implementation of the divine will, wisdom, age, influence, commitment to the religion and its representatives, and even zealousness. I think that's a word. Anyway, being very zealous. The best example is how the Pope is elected. On paper, any Roman Catholic male can be elected, but from the 14th century onward, only members of the College of Cardinals have been elected. And with this, we return to what I listed a moment ago. Adherence to the religion, standing within the religion, etc. These were all taken into account, and they needed to be there for somebody to be elected. And how would somebody prove their adherence to the religion and gain standing within the religion, other than by being part of the College of Cardinals? Upon the death of the Pope, a few days of mourning are held, and then the College of Cardinals comes together and they elect a new Pope by vote at the conclave. I'm sure that negotiations go on, influence is used, promises are made, etc. But one thing is for sure, and this is one of the things I find the most fascinating when it comes to popes. Each new pope brings something new to the table, and usually the name they take up as popes kind of show the directions in which they are going. Each pope takes up a papal name after someone they look up to, be it a family member, a predecessor, or patron saint even. A name that indicates the direction the theocracy will take and the beliefs the new pope holds. Pope Francis, for example, took the papal name after Saint Francis of Assisi. Before being canonized, Francis of Assisi rebuilt a small church one stone at a time as he was begging for stone around the cities. Then he started looking after the lepers in the leper colony near Assisi. He later took a vow of poverty and created the Franciscan order by preaching penance, brotherly love and peace. And over time he drew followers, or friars, 11 in number, and he asked the Pope at that time, Pope Innocentius III, for recognition of his order. The Pope told him and his followers that they will be recognized once their number grew. Long story short, their numbers grew and they were recognized as Order of the Friars Minor, or the Franciscan Order, or the Seraphic Order, for various reasons. Soon after, they founded the Order of Poor Clares, for women who wanted to join their order. They grew even more and they started accepting people who wanted to follow their teachings but without taking the vows of priesthood. And thus, the Third Order of Brothers and Sisters of Penance was created. Francis and his followers sported the tonsura, the specific haircut that shows their devotion to the church. I wonder if the women sported the same haircut. That would have been something, wouldn't it? Why am I telling you all this? Well, because Francis even preached to birds and other animals and looked after them. He is now considered Saint Patron of animals and ecology, the patron saint against dying alone, against fire, of family, peace and needleworkers. Pope Francis has a lot to say when it comes to global warming, ecology, animals, wildfire, the poorest among us, peace and family. And I don't know where needlework comes into play, but I do like to think that he practices needlework with old nonas on the Isle of Burano in his time off. He tries to steer the Catholic Church towards things that concern the world right now when it comes to the climate crisis, the changing values of family. He's also trying to rebuild the image and confidence in the Catholic Church one stone at a time, and his papal name showed us the direction he was taking. Another example of how theocrats come to power comes from Iran, where the Assembly of Experts select the supreme leader of Iran and also have the power to dismiss the supreme leader. Both of these pieces of information can easily make their way into your world building and create plot hooks. What kind of power do theocrats have? By the nature of their rule, they have supreme power because they interpret the will of the god, or they are a representative of the god. I ask you, who can stand against that or try to contradict that? They have supreme power over the population they rule and often employ ruthless and merciless methods of holding on to power and imposing the will of the god. Depending on the time and place in history, any word uttered against the supreme religious ruler was dealt with swiftly, harshly, and without a second thought. One notorious example in history was the Inquisition, started in the 12th century in France. The Inquisitors took it upon themselves to defend Catholicism because it was very weak and frail against heresy, meaning doubt shown in regards to a core doctrine of a religion. Apostasy, meaning someone who renounced the religion or converted to another religion. Blasphemy, meaning someone who insulted the deity. And against witchcraft and even behaviors that were considered deviant, like being a single woman who liked cats or knowing herbs and helping others. The problem is that everything on this list is a matter of interpretation, and I am sure you can see this means that anything on the list can be used against anyone, and abuses were nothing out of the ordinary. Actually, they were very rampant. And first thing comes to mind, the witch trials. The first Inquisition was called the Roman Inquisition, but by the 15th century, the Renaissance started spreading across Europe, and of course the church had to respond. And as a response, the Spanish Inquisition and the Portuguese Inquisition were born, going after scientists and after newly converts, especially Jews who officially converted to Christianity to avoid prosecution. And shortly thereafter, the Inquisition expanded to the rest of the Spanish and Portuguese empires, meaning in places like Goa, Peru and Mexico, who said fun things cannot be shared. Although if you look at medieval Spain, Portugal, France, England, etc., they were not really theocracies. Their kings and queens had divine power on their side, meaning they were anointed by their divinity. And if they didn't have the state religions themselves, like in the case of England, they had really close bonds with the heads of the state religion. This gave the Inquisition a lot of power throughout Europe that in other normal circumstances would not have been granted. With the exception of the Vatican City, the Inquisition has been abolished in the 19th century, so less than 200 years ago. While in the Vatican, it still exists under the name of Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith. The Pope decides the general direction of the Church, recommends the canonization of saints, and has supreme power of jurisdiction over the universal Church when it comes to faith and morals, discipline and government of the Church. That's why most Catholic priests get away scot-free. Another great example is the Ayatollah in Iran, where the supreme leader is the supreme commander of the armed forces and the head of the three branches of state: the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive all in one. He names the Chief Justice of Iran, he inaugurates the president, and with the support of the parliament can impeach the president. He names the ministers of defense, intelligence, foreign affairs, interior, and science, the director of the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting, and among many other offices, the Ayatollah names the commander of the Law Enforcement Command. Part of this command, we have the Morality Police, also known as the Guidance Patrol, tasked with arresting and re-educating people who do not follow the Islamic dress code. Mostly women, because of course. So in other words, Theocrats wield supreme power, and it's nigh impossible to argue with them as they have their god with them. And besides being above mortal law, they're also protected by really religious people. In a theocracy, who do the rulers listen to? Well, this depends on the time and space we are talking about, but as I mentioned moments ago, theocrats are elected by a college or assembly of religious figures, meaning that a theocrat heavily relies on other religious scholars and of course on their own interpretation of divine law, which in my opinion is as scary as things can get. If you don't agree with this sentiment, just look at the Inquisition, the Morality Police, and even the Cult of Personality in North Korea. Theocrats and their subjects. Given the examples we spoke of, we get a clear picture of the relationship between theocrats and their subjects. In a nutshell, as long as you follow the religious law, you are fine, but the moment you say something insulting related to the gods or the divinely ordained ruler, or something that can be interpreted as being insulting, or you deviate from the dogma, you are kinda screwed. This is just like in a dictatorship, where the supreme leader is untouchable, above reproach and above the law. Theocracies, then and now. Throughout history we had multiple examples of theocracies, with little to no change to their core attributes, beliefs and characteristics. Starting with the Jewish people, who were, according to Josephus, following the divine laws set before them by their God, to the Roman Empire, where emperors were both the head of the state religion and the subjects of the imperial cult of personality, to the Roman, Spanish and Portuguese Inquisition in medieval times, to the theocracies of today's world. Things have not changed, as religion is very slow to change and adapt. The Enlightenment signaled the end of theocracies in most of Europe, but as you can see, some still survived. Examples of modern theocracies. Nowadays we do have a handful of theocracies throughout the world, although many states kinda played the God is on our side card, especially in politics, so yeah. But let's talk about pure theocracies. First, we have the Vatican City, the best known example and one of the oldest surviving theocracies in the world. Closely second, we have the Republic of Iran, a state that turned to theocracy after the revolution in 1979, started because of secularization, the adoption of Western ideas, and a slide towards authoritarianism. Yeah, they ended up really well. Afghanistan, a state that returned to theocracy after the resurgence of the Taliban, who even banned having pets. I mean, I don't get what's wrong with having pets, but they have their reasons. Saudi Arabia, a state with a very different organization. It is an absolute monarchy where the Prime Minister is also king, and since 1992, by royal decree, the king and country must comply with Sharia law, and the Quran and the Sunnah are the country's constitution. They also have a religious police that patrol the streets and make sure that the Sharia law is rigorously followed. We also have Mauritania, one of the few African theocracies, a country where atheism is illegal and punishable by death. Yemen, a state that has the Sharia law at the core of the country's laws and regulations. And we can also include on this list Andorra, a country that is ruled by two co-princes, the Roman Catholic bishop and the President of France. Both are co-princes. How to use all we learned today in your world building. As you can see, it is not that difficult to introduce a theocracy in your world, given the examples we just mentioned and the fact that fantasy world is often heavily reliant on divinity or supernatural phenomenons. I would go for either a god, king or queen, basically down the route of an avatar of a deity sitting on the throne of a state. An individual who rules with an iron fist and strikes down anyone who insults or even doubts them. Or I would go with the classic theocracy version, where the college of high priests of either one particular deity or a group of deities elect a representative who really interprets the signs from the gods or even speaks directly to the god and rules over the Inquisition. Or I would go down what I call the Jack Sparrow route, where an individual, a scoundrel, a rogue somehow gets elected head of a church and becomes a theocrat. They are desperate to get out before they are found out, as they would be tortured, executed and their entrails examined to interpret the divine will, all because of their transgression. So they ask for the party's help to escape. Or you can even create a good theocracy in your world, a country where all refugees, all those suffering, all those in need are welcomed. A state that practices forgiveness and compassion towards everyone for any reason. In my opinion, you can use such a governmental organization in so many ways, you can't go wrong. Mango's 8th name is Eternal Darkness. Actually, my wife pointed out that I was going about this wrong, giving only one word as part of a name. So now I'm giving the actual name. So, Eternal Darkness is the 8th Actually, I need to recalculate it. I think I'm gonna restart the whole cat's name just to make sure that they're out there properly. Anyway. And with that, if you enjoyed this video and found value in it, make sure you hit that like button as it shows me it was useful. Subscribe and join this growing, wonderfully funky community. Hit the bell so you are notified when the next video is out, and share it with your friends, your GMs, your DMs, your storytellers, creators, players, neighbors, family, pets, everyone, if you want to go the extra mile. Oh, and don't forget to comment down below on how you would use or are currently using Theocracies in your world, as I'm very, very curious. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time. I truly hope you found some inspiration and learned something new today, and I can't wait to see you all funky people here next time on Funky Monkey MP, the place where you get your dose of history, world building and trivia, and some miniature painting soon enough, I promise. Remember, be curious, take inspiration from the past, and never stop learning, world building and creating amazing things, whatever those are. Your mind and imagination are awesome, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Until next time, have yourselves a wonderful, wonderful, funky day. Cheers.